Hi, Amiki has just been revealed, and after looking through some of her kit, I have some thoughts on how good she'll be, what you may use her for, and so much more. Let's get into it. So first off, I'm going to give a little bit of a preview or let it play and show off the little animation that it has.
You're ready to die. Don't.
That looks pretty cool. Honestly, for an especially changed character, I don't really have that high expectations animations-wise or even kit-wise, just because, well, I've been battered, beaten, and my expectations are pretty low. However, I think that was a pretty cool looking animation, and Amiki looks pretty good. If you aren't familiar with Amiki, she's a 3-star water ice character who is a warrior and primarily focuses on being an annoying immortality threat. But let's take a look at all the changes that have happened to her and how good or how bad she is now. So, in terms of her base stats, she has been updated, or I guess now, rather, she has 107 speed and roughly 1200 attack with a decent amount of other stats. She doesn't really need crit rate or crit damage, as we'll see in a moment, but she does have decent stats, all things considered. Not really that, or not that it really matters anyways. So the first thing that they've shown from Amiki is that her S2 cooldown has not changed at all when it comes to, or rather the effectiveness, or basically what this skill does, has not changed between the old Amiki and the new specialty change. But now her S3 has changed, so instead of just simply penetrating and dealing a decent amount of damage with her S3, now it has a splash similar to that of, I guess it's like Little Queen Charlotte, or pretty much any character that you can imagine that has the additional splash damage after landing a successful attack. But the interesting thing about this is when you take a look at the runes that have been added to the character. So again, to be clear, when the caster is immortal, this grants an additional turn to Amiki, and this is part of the reason why Amiki is so strong. It, generally speaking, allows her to continuously stay in immortality, and you have to, if you're just with Amiki and you're trying to anti-cleave against someone, or if you're trying to fight against a particularly annoying damage dealer that can't strip, Amiki kind of just sits there, continues to provoke, or just play like a Kairon or a Bloodblade Karen, and kind of punishes you for it. And to be honest, in most cases, outside of playing against cleave, there's no really good reason to pick Amiki. Generally speaking, whenever I'd see Amiki even picked, it would be as basically a replacement to Kairon, because someone would, pre-ban Kairon, or have someone else that would deal with Kairon, and Amiki was basically just a runner-up. But in terms of the new runes that she has, now she has an additional, I want to say it's 4 plus 6, 8, 9 speed. The thing that I'm a little bit curious about, because I'm not too sure myself how these things are treated, but I'm assuming that she's 107 based on this, because it looks like she's plus 15 and runes and all this stuff, which means that I guess her base speed normally is 98. If she ends up being 116, that's also kind of interesting. But truth be told, as with most speed-based characters, or as with any character that has to be built with speed, if they're being built to be a counter character anyways, sometimes this doesn't even necessarily help her. However, the additional attack percent that's been added, which is 20% attack, does also help, and we'll see why later. Primarily, again, because you're trying to get the most out of her S1 or her S3 damage. But okay, cool. So she's got a few additional stats right off the bat, but then she also has runes that change the effect of her other skills. The main being her skill 3, which increases the damage of it, and also granting it a 100% chance to reset the cooldown of it, which is also pretty cool. Now, to be clear, this does have a 6-turn cooldown, and in most cases, I would imagine that players are likely going to be using something like Hua Young's artifact, Uberius Tooth, or in some fringe cases, I could maybe see someone using Goblet of Oath or something, some cooldown reduction changing effect, just to be really annoying. The same way that in the past, players would, try to use like Elvira's pairing with Candlestick to great success. And unlike Elvira's change, where they've removed that, if you end up getting hit like 30 times with this character, hey, you know what? Maybe the damage is actually good enough that you can just rely on Candlestick to increase your cooldown. Now, here's the thing, here's the thing that's a little bit interesting or kind of uncertain about the character right now, at least in my opinion. It's that I'm somewhat unsure about whether the additional splash damage in general will be good enough for you to be able to take off a damage dealing artifact. And I'm also, in most cases, not exactly sure whether this character is going to work without a decent amount of ER. And that's where the showcase will come into play. But before we get into the showcase, the final changes that you've seen, or the final changes that the showcase, were that she now fully cleanses herself before she uses S2. And the immortality, again, in most cases is really nice. But again, the way that this is a little bit confusing, so I apologize in advance. I did make a video on her long ago, but from what I understand, the way that her S2 works is that she grants herself immortality and then increases the attack increases her attack for 2 turns. However, when she receives lethal damage, it increases, or sorry, it resets this cooldown. And again, this is where the whole like infinite cycling immortality thing is supposed to happen. And at least from what I understand, if you're able to use your skill 3, this gives you a couple turns worth of immortality. And the idea, I'm assuming, is supposed to be that you can kill the enemy within like 2, basically like maybe potentially 3 total turns of immortality. And at least from what I experienced in the past, this was good enough for me to, in most cases, kill off a cleaver or kill any cleaver's team. But again, based on what you'll see here in a second, it looks like they spend more time trying to finish the game in 1 or 2 turns, as opposed to constantly reset the cooldown of the Amiki's S3. Now, again, in terms of usability, I could maybe see this being a little bit more viable if you end up pairing her alongside characters like Christie. But as we all know, because certain characters in the game, like Briar Witch Iseria or even Veronica in some cases, punish you or will remove any character that tries to rely on things like immortality, we have a couple things to look at. So, in terms of the gameplay of the character... Oh, sorry. Actually, I apologize. Before we get to that, the final change... misspeak, that they added to this character's kit is that her S1 has also been increased in damage, while also increasing its chance to provoke by 25%. And again, this is also part of the reason, I apologize, why people would always use or would somewhat use Hua Yang's artifact, because again, she gets 2 extra attacks with the same skill, and since the defense is already penetrated and she's a warrior and she doesn't really need any crit, this does do decent amounts of damage when you stack attack on it. Now, a total of or I guess several increases of damage make this pretty interesting. What I would think is even more interesting is, again, the ability to provoke, and honestly just the fact that if you take a look at the team that they are picked into. Oh. Okay. Final change. I apologize. I don't know. I'm getting debated a little bit by like the cooldown, by like the little frames here. Yes, she also has been given a 15% chance to counterattack, which is of course very nice. It's basically a built-in Elbrus. And if they decide to hit her, well, most players will be building this character on counter set anyways. And assuming that's the case, she's basically like a glorified knight or a glorified, I don't know, any kind of counter Elbrusing character. But now she has it built into her kit, which is also really nice. Now, okay, for real, the actual gameplay of the character involves her basically being fought by a more cleave-heavy character. And now, okay, I know what you're thinking, and if you take a look at this, it does look really bad for the enemy, but since she receives lethal damage and the Sid, of course, AI is forced to hit her, she cleanses. Now, in a moment, you'll see that literally her whole team basically dies, and there's nothing left to her team. But this is kind of unironically where Amiki shines. Now, Amiki right here already has immortality, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe, yeah, she uses her Soulburn S3, and this gives her 1 more turn of immortality, which is cool. right? The damage here is pretty significant. That ended up doing, I'm assuming, probably like in terms of like actual normal damage, this will probably do something like 60 to maybe 70% of any character's health just based off of splash. And for the squishier characters, yeah, this will probably one-shot anything. However, as you're seeing right here, once she used her S3, she was given an extra turn, and now she has the ability to provide herself with immortality again, though she doesn't do it. Oh, right, because she, I guess, hasn't already procced it. Again, I will be completely honest, in terms of cooldowns and things like this character is a little bit confusing. If you aren't familiar with all the annoyingness of immortality as well in this game, it is really frustrating sometimes to keep track of how many cooldowns of what you have. And based on this, she has 2 total technical immortalities. I guess 3, 1 because obviously in this case she provoked, she got hit again, so that would have been her second immortality. And once she used her her S2 here, sorry, I'm trying to move it so you could see it. Her first immortality gets procced, and she has it right here after she gets hit by the BBK. Right? Or rather, with the Sid, her first immortality comes out. This gives her, well, I mean, she already has her S3, but she casts her S3 after this, which resets the cooldown of her immortality. Or I guess technically gives her 1 more turn of immortality. And this does, again, decent amount of damage, all things considered. But given that she has so many turns at this point of immortality, it starts to get a little bit goofy. And it does deal decent damage. It one-shots Sid, ends up doing 8,900 damage. Amiki, you can't really see it right here, but at the bottom left, she's got only roughly like 9,000 attack or 9,000 HP, which means that this is probably a more ER or a more attack and or potentially ER build, but we'll never know because she's fighting against a Tywin with rage. But in this case, while also being provoked again, she has not procced, I'm assuming in this case, her S2 immortality again, which is cool. But now she, again, has a 3rd potential chance for immortality, which, I don't know, that's pretty cool. And yeah. Actually, am I crazy? She doesn't use her S2 here. Okay, I understand. I apologize. I was a little bit thrown off. It's not 3 turns of immortality. It's 2, and if she decides to not use her S2 in this case for whatever reason, she can just S1 and it will count as being activated if you decide to not use it anyways. So basically what happened here is, in exchange for not being given the combat readiness push, she decided to go for the provoke on S1. And even though she didn't end up using her S2 to give herself another turn of immortality, it's activated by Bloodblade Karen attacking her anyways, and therefore she received it without having to use the S2 anyways, or without having to actually use the skill, and she received its effects anyways. Okay, I apologize. I'm not the best when it comes to certain characters like this. Their kits are a little bit ambiguous, and in terms of when they get changed with specialty changes and stuff, it's incredibly complex sometimes, but that's just me being stupid. The S2 does look really cool, and overall my thoughts on this character is that, well, if you aren't someone that is using Bloodblade Karen, yeah, there are times when Amiki can be used against certain cleave setups, but despite all the cool effects and despite all the coolness that you can do with a character like this, the main thing that sets her apart now as opposed to other characters is that when you get to a point where you are basically at lethal, you get cleansed, which is quite interesting because, again, you would imagine that after this setup from a Tywin and the Sid, you would imagine that Amiki is kind of over and done with, which, to be honest, even if the Sid ends up attacking any other character in this case. The Amiki does have a pretty good chance of trying to set up for the solo. However, the AI is a little bit dishonest here simply because the ML Politis doesn't end up stripping the additional immortality from Amiki here. That being said, it does look like kind of a dicey situation for the right side team here, just because Amiki is already kind of in a good position to begin soloing the enemy team. My thoughts at the end of the day, though, is that I'm not sure to what extent this will stop characters like New Moon Luna, or will stop characters from, unbuffabling and then reapplying an unbuffable, or trying to prevent this character from doing anything. And otherwise, if you aren't fighting a cleave team that has a lot of options, truthfully, right now to try and stop someone like Amiki, I don't think she'll be super insane, honestly, against slower characters or slower players, which is fine because that's obviously not you, or not what it looks like she was designed for, but looks a little bit interesting. I was hoping that they'd maybe give her a little bit more survivability, which they kind of did, but instead of giving her a cleanse, or preventing her from getting unbuffed or getting sealed or stripped or something like that, she cleanses herself for one more turn, which doesn't really stop a lot of the current openers in the game from either stunning her or stripping her again, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that does sound like kind of a really strong thing to give to a specially changed character. So, long story short, I imagine this character will probably be used in place of Bloodblade Karen if you're trying to anti-cleave someone. Otherwise, I am unsure to what extent this character will be used right now, especially since it seems like you can still play around her and kill everyone else and then get to her last. Anyways, though, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks again for watching. I think she's probably a 7 out of 10 character. I'm going to be building her, but I think for the average player, you will probably not see as much usage for this character. You can arguably use this to bait out a grass unit on Guild War defense, but I don't know to what extent that'll really be useful because I don't really see that many grass characters in general on defense. Outside of maybe an off chance Violet, but anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you want to play this character, feel free to. She looks interesting, but I don't know how I feel too much about her yet. I'm not super sold on her kit. Could be interesting in certain cleave setups. I'll definitely give her that. And maybe with Christy, she'll be even more interesting. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.